My friends and I used to have this thing with Kinder eggs. For those who aren't lucky enough to have these in their country, they're basically hollow, egg-shaped chocolates with little plastic capsules in the middle with toys inside. If one of us went to the shop, we'd buy enough eggs for the rest of the house. If we were at the supermarket, we'd see if they had cheap deals on the multi-packs. We weren't buying them for the admittedly delicious chocolate. No, we were really in it for the toys. Considering most of us were 20-something students, it does seem a bit odd that we'd be so excited about cheap pieces of plastic. But, for some reason, we got hours of entertainment out of those things. Not just the toys themselves, of course, but the excitement and anticipation that came with seeing who got the best toy from their egg. The best toys were the ones that had moving parts, or the ones you could throw at each other, like parachute army men or those little plastic frisbee things. The booby prizes were definitely the tiny 8-piece jigsaw puzzles. Whoever was unlucky enough to get one of those was mocked mercilessly, and woe betide the person who brought home a job lot of crappy puzzle eggs. I was lying on the sofa in our lounge when my housemate charged in through the doors and threw something at me. I somehow managed to catch it and opened my hands to see a slightly squashed kindersurprised egg in my palms. "Cheers, Kelly!" I gave her a thumbs up before setting the egg on the table. "Wait for me to put the rest of my shopping away. I want to open them at the same time," Kelly said, wiggling an egg of her own at me. We sat down at the table and tore into our eggs. Kelly opened her toy first. "Oh, fuck," she hissed, dropping the pieces of a tiny jigsaw puzzle onto the table. I decided to hold back the mocking until after opening my egg. Premature mocking would almost definitely jinx me into the same shitty puzzle toy-based fate. I opened up my chocolate egg and took out the capsule. I shook it. Whatever was inside felt heavier than a puzzle. I smiled. I opened the capsule and tipped out the contents onto the table, feeling victorious. "What the fuck is that?" Kelly gasped. On the table was a small grey lump. I picked it up. On closer inspection, it appeared to be a tiny plastic hippo, covered in some sort of felted material. "That's almost worse than a puzzle," Kelly cackled as I checked the capsule for any other parts that might make this toy a bit less shitty. "No such luck." "Thanks anyway, Kelly," I laughed, picking up some of the chocolate to eat. Kelly set about making dinner with her other things that she'd bought from the shop. I picked up the hippo toy and went upstairs to my room. On the way to my room, I had an idea. Listening for a moment, to check Kelly was still downstairs, I walked over to her room. I placed the hippo gently on the handle of her door. I thought she would find it funny to come back to. This little thing just perched on her door handle. I certainly thought it looked quite comical. Stood on all fours, on the little metal ledge. I figured, this toy is shitty. May as well try my best to have some fun with it. An hour or so later, I hear Kelly walking along the hallway past my room. Moments later, I hear her howl of laughter. "Very funny!" she yelled through the wall. "You may have got me this time, but you'll be getting this back very soon." The next morning, I went into the bathroom. Opening the medicine cabinet, I was startled to see a little grey hippo face staring back at me from on top of my toothpaste. I picked up the hippo and smiled. Maybe this wasn't such a bad toy after all. Soon, this became something of a game, and the rest of our housemates joined in. It took Seth, another of the housemates, a week to find the hippo inside of one of his shoes. Amy, who spent a lot of time in London seeing her boyfriend, was greeted by our hippo friend sat inside a baking tray when she was in her kitchen cupboard to find a frying pan. Kelly always found the hippo the fastest. It was almost as if she was constantly looking for it. I seemed to get targeted the least by the hippo game, but I always tried my best to find the most amusing places when it came to my turn. One of the rare weekends when Amy wasn't in London with her boyfriend, we had decided to go on a house night, out to a club in town. A few hours into festivities, and 3/4 of the way through a bottle of red wine, I noticed that I am having great difficulty pouring wine from my bottle into my glass. Holding it up to the kitchen light, worried a piece of cork was getting stuck in the neck, I was shocked to see a distinctly hippo-shaped silhouette floating on top of the remaining wine. Considering it was getting stuck in the neck, I was amazed at the ingenuity of whoever managed to brute force that thing into the main part of the bottle. We all oohed and awed at one of the most hilarious and clever hiding spaces yet. There was one issue, though. How the hell were we going to get it out? In his drunken state, Seth had an idea. "Give me the bottle," he slurred, waving at me to hand it over, which I promptly did. "And pass me a towel or something." Seth took the bottle outside via the back door into the garden, and we followed. Kelly appeared moments later with a towel from the bathroom and handed it to Seth. Seth wrapped his hand in the towel and grabbed the bottle by the neck. "Stand back!" he yelled, before bringing the bottle down hard on the floor. Glass flew everywhere. Amy and I clapped and guffawed as the hippo slid out onto the concrete floor in a puddle of red wine. Kelly went to pick it up, but was stopped in her tracks when she noticed Seth crouched on the floor, clutching his hand, out of which was sticking a huge piece of green glass. Blood from his hand dripped down onto the hippo, mixing with the wine. Our night was spent at the emergency room instead of at the club. Seth was fine. The glass hadn't cut anything major, but the cut was certainly deep. He had needed stitches. I had left the hippo out to dry on the side at home. We all had a good laugh about it once we knew Seth was going to be fine. I woke up the next morning with the world's worst hangover. Clutching my churning stomach, I rolled over to check the time on my alarm clock. It was way too early to be awake on a Sunday morning. I dragged myself up anyway, feeling the need to stretch a little. While I sat up, I noticed that one of my stuffed toys that I kept on my shelf had fallen to the floor. It was a soft brown bear, one I had had for over a decade. I reached across my floor, trying my best to stay under the warm bed covers. I picked it up and gave it a squeeze for nostalgia's sake. I frowned and squeezed the bear again. It didn't feel right. There was something hard in the middle of the bear that hadn't been there before. I thought for a second that maybe this was one of those talking bears with a speaker lodged inside. But it didn't make any sound when I squeezed, and I didn't recall it being that kind of bear. My head swimming, I opened my dressing table and reached for my nail scissors. I flipped the bear around and began to cut along the seam in the back. Picking through the stuffing, I froze as I saw a familiar, grey lump nestled inside the white cotton. Annoyed that my housemates would come into my private room without permission, let alone cut up a childhood toy, I forced myself out of bed to confront them. Fueled by my hangover, perhaps I was more grouchy than I would have been normally. But something about this felt decidedly malicious. The rest of my housemates were all sat in the kitchen with cups of tea as I stumbled in. "Who last had the hippo?" They all looked at me nonplussed. "Isn't that against the rules? Asking who had it?" Amy nodded, and Seth shrugged. "I didn't know there were rules," he said, looking nervously at the hippo in my hand. "Not proper ones, anyway. Why do you ask?" "Whoever hid this in my room," I said aggressively, waving the hippo at my friends, "you overstepped a boundary. You shouldn't be going in my private domain, let alone cutting up my toys." Kelly choked on her tea. "What, your toys? Are you 12? I narrowed my eyes, I didn't know Kelly to be a particularly good actress, but she had always been a bit more daring with her hiding places. "Besides," she said, putting her mug down on the table, "I haven't had time to go into your room. As far as I know, it was on the side in the kitchen at 4 a.m. when we got back from the hospital, and I went straight to bed." "Yeah," piped up Seth. "And my hand is too messed up to cut anything up." Amy had remained silent. "Well, Amy?" She looked up at me, frowning. "Didn't you go straight to your room when we got back? I'm way too clumsy to have snuck in while you slept to hide that thing. It wasn't me." All three of them sat in awkward silence for a moment. I huffed. "Well then, I'm not sure I want to play this game anymore if that's how it's going to be." I threw the hippo down onto the table. Kelly went to say something, but I didn't hear her speak before I'd slammed the kitchen door behind me. On Monday evening, I was in the kitchen unpacking after a day at my part-time job. It had been a colleague's birthday at work, and I'd been given the remnants of the birthday cake I'd bought him. It was a huge iced cake from the cash and carry. There were a lot of staff at my job, lots of hungry mouths to feed, but there was still plenty left for my housemates. "Oh, can I have a slice?" Kelly chimed in as she breezed into the kitchen. "Classes were killer today, and I am starving." My mood hadn't really improved since the bear incident, although I had noticed that the hippo hadn't resurfaced since Sunday morning, and it was gone from the table. I was hoping they had been smart and had either thrown it out or were just sticking to playing with each other. Still, I faked a smile and cut Kelly a slice of the cake. She grabbed it and took a bite, saying, "Thanks," through a mouthful of crumbs. She was about to take a second bite when I saw her face fall. "Really? Really? You think this is okay?" She looked up at me, and back to the cake in her hands. I raised my brows. "What?" She plucked something from the middle of the slice. "This!" she hissed, waving something small and grey in my face. "The fucking hippo!" Yeah, don't play stupid with me," she pouted, dumping the rest of the cake onto the kitchen counter. "I get that you're angry, but Jesus, this is a bit much. You could have choked me." "I swear, Kelly, I didn't do it." I was staring at the hippo between her fingers. "I stopped playing, remember? Besides, after everything that's happened with my toy, even with Seth's hand, why would I do something that stupid?" Kelly looked confused for a moment, before her face softened. "Yeah, you're right," she sighed, twirling the hippo in her hand. "I'm not going to stop playing, though." She put the hippo in her pocket. "I'll make sure we're more sensible with where we put it." I didn't really reply. If anyone hid it for me to find, I thought to myself, it's going right in the bin. But next weekend, after a hippo-free week, all of us were surprised to get a Facebook message from Amy. She was in London with her boyfriend, and it was rare for her to get into contact while spending time with him. She told us to check her Facebook wall. She posted a photo, and lo and behold, it was the goddamn hippo, covered in some sort of brown powder. Turns out she had found it inside a tube of hot chocolate powder. Weird thing about it, though, was that it was her boyfriend's stuff, not hers. She wanted to know which one of us had posted it to him, and how they'd gotten him in on it, because he was apparently denying everything. We all said we had no idea. I definitely had no idea, and emphasized again how done I was with the game. Amy said she was going to leave the hippo in London. Kelly protested. I closed down my computer before I could see the conversation go any further, and made sure my bedroom door was locked before putting myself, rather grumpily, to bed. As expected, the next week went by hippo-free. When Amy came back on Monday morning, she told me she had left it down there with her boyfriend. She said she felt too nostalgic about it as a fun part of our friendship to throw it out, but wanted to give me a break. I thanked her for being considerate, and internally breathed a sigh of relief. Sat in the lounge. It felt like I was finally going to get some peace from the damn hippo game. I was sat cross-legged on the sofa, reading some stuff on my laptop, when I heard a commotion from upstairs. I assumed it was just Amy making a mess until someone came crashing through the lounge door. I couldn't tell who it was, but whoever they were making horrible wheezing noises. I put my laptop down and rushed over. It was Kelly. She was trying to speak, but no words came out, just gurgling and coughing. She was now rolling around on the floor, clawing at her throat, her face bright red, eyes wide with fear. She was choking. I was on the phone with the paramedics before I had consciously thought about it. Kelly was barely conscious now. Her lips blue, her arms starting to twitch involuntarily. The ambulance came within minutes, but it was too late. Kelly had stopped breathing. Her eyes had rolled into the back of her skull. Her limbs were contorted into horrible, unnatural shapes. Her hands wrapped around her stretched, sinewy throat. The following days were a blur. Thankfully, Seth and Amy were much more together than I was, and they kept me somewhat functional while we waited for the results of the autopsy. Police had come around to ask a few questions, but left us alone when it became clear it was just a tragic accident. 7 days after Kelly's death, there was a knock on the front door. I trudged downstairs and opened it. The cheerful postman handed me a bunch of letters as well as a small package for which I had to sign. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular in the house, but I assumed it was one of the many things I'd forgotten that I'd ordered off of eBay. I tore it open and grimaced as the contents fell onto the floor. That fucking hippo! I picked it up. Its small grey face was worn now, and it was covered in stains. Blood, wine, cake, hot chocolate, an amusingly morbid thought crossed my mind. For all the trouble this hippo had caused, I was starting to see why kindersurprised eggs were illegal in the US. The fond memories of Kelly and her love of the hippo game brought back some of the happiness I'd felt before her unfortunate death. I took the hippo into the lounge and placed it on the table, thinking of all the funniest places I'd managed to hide it, trying hard not to remember the bad ones. I was startled out of my daydream by someone at the door again. I scooped up the hippo out of habit and wandered back to the front hall. This time, I was greeted by 2 uniformed police officers, the ones who had spoken to us the previous week. "Hello, Talia. We have some news about your housemate." I gulped, clutching hard onto the hippo for comfort. "What's happened? I thought we were all finished?" The police looked at each other. "The autopsy report came back. We have reason to believe that Kelly's death was, in fact, a homicide." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Not only that, but someone has tampered with the evidence, and we were wondering if you could help us identify something." One of the officers reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a grainy photocopy. It was a copy of an X-ray of a person's throat. Kelly's throat. There was a white mass where there should have been a blank space. Far down her trachea, something lodged in there, halfway down her windpipe. I squinted. It was a weird shape. Kind of lumpy, but with 4 distinctly uniform bumps, and a far bigger lump at one end. It was kind of hippo-shaped. "Now," continued the officer, as I held it together as best I could, "I understand this may be hard, but we want to know, have you any idea what this object might be?" Didn't they take it out of her? You know, to find out? I stammered, clutching harder at the hippo hidden in my hand. The officer grimaced and shook her head. That's what we mean when we say tampered evidence. They, the doctors, opened up her throat the next day to have a look, after the results of the X-ray, and there was nothing there.
Yeah,
the other officer added, shifting nervously on his feet.
There were still signs that something had been there, but no signs of attempted removal of any kind. And no leads, which is why we're back here. We understand she was also your friend, so want you to be kept in the loop with what's going on the investigation. We also have a few more questions for you. So, first of all, we'd like to know who else had been in the house on the day of Kelly's death.
The officers asked me a few more questions, then asked to speak to my housemates. I sat alone in the lounge, clinging onto the tiny hippo. The police eventually left the house, and Amy and Seth stayed in their rooms. It was clear to me now. I was stuck with this hippo forever. The game had started, and it wasn't going to stop. I walked over to the kitchen counter and opened the drawer. Filing through the various cutlery, I picked out a particularly sharp knife. Holding the knife tightly in one hand, and the hippo in the other, I left the lounge and ascended the stairs. I approached Amy's bedroom and knocked. I gripped the knife tighter. "Hey, Amy, can I borrow you for a second?" I invented the hippo game, and I was going to win.